So students struggle with book citations when they get anything that varies slightly from the standard book of it has an author, a title, a date, and a publishing house. What really can trip a lot of students up is what do you do when you have editors? If you Especially if you have editors and authors, that tends to confuse students. So if you scroll down on this page beyond the basic format for books, you get all of this APA info for variations of books. So what type of bibliographic can you see other than just an author and the basic book info? So if it's an edited book, and so the person being listed on the cover is being listed as the editor as opposed to an author, the only real difference is that you list the name, first name, last name, and then you put out in parentheses next to it, ed period, close parentheses. So you're just denoting that this person that you're listing is an editor, not necessarily an author. Everything else is really the same. If you're doing a book that has authors and editors, this is what really confuses students. You don't put them all at the beginning of the citation. So if you have authors and editors in a book that you need to list so that it lists one person as the author and then the next person underneath it, it lists them as the editor. And so they're telling you it's edited by so-and-so. You would list the author at the beginning like you normally do. You would then list the editor after the title. So you're getting the author, the date of publication, title of the work in italics, and then after that, you give parentheses, the editor's name, listing them again as an editor, close parentheses, and then move on to the publisher. So the example this Purdue Owl gives is this book, Le Morte d'Arthur, which is a story about King Arthur. Written by T. Mallory. This version was published in 2017, but you're seeing out next to it, you're getting this PJC Field, editor, ED, is being listed as the editor of the book. And so you do get that kind of variations of it, especially if it's reprints of a book. So you're seeing this exact work is actually from the Middle Ages. So the original work was published in the 1400s. Relevant to that specific book, most of the time you wouldn't have to list that. The difference between listing the editors, when you're listing authors, or if you're listing the editor as the very first part of the citation, so a book with that has an editor but no author, you list it last name, first initial, so Leach, MG, and Rushton, CJ. If you're listing the editors after the title, because the book also has an author, you're going to list it first initial, last name. So that's why you're getting that PJC Field as the editor. So biggest thing is you want to make a note when you have an editor versus when it's just the author. So you really need to pay attention to that when you're looking at the bibliographic info. The most common place students see this isn't with a book that just has editors or that just has authors. The most common place students see it is when you're getting an author of a chapter and then an editor for the entire book. And so you do need to list both of those. So what we're going to practice with this is what do we do if it is a chapter today. So for that, coming back to my citations of where did my chapters go? Okay, so looking at this book of The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. You might have heard of this I doubt y'all had to read it in high school though. So you're seeing that you're getting this Taylor Haygood as an editor. This is a book of criticism about The Sound and the Fury. It's not the actual text of The Sound and the Fury. And if you saw the real book, you would understand that. So this is an online one. So we're going to go to the actual ebook for this one. So full text from there to there. Click on that. And so you're seeing this ebook is being broken down into the chapter titles because each chapter has a different author. So if we were looking at this chapter, The Outside Garden, The Natural World, and The Sound and the Fury. So it's an essay, article, criticism about the book, The Sound and the Fury. Clicking on that, you are getting a different set of information about who the author is. So for this, if we wanted to cite just this chapter out of this book, this is going to be more like citing an article out of a citation or an article out of a journal than it is citing just like a book, but they're very similar for that. So first thing is listing the author. So you have this author, Christopher Rieger, and we're doing comma C, or comma C and then period at the end. Your then next thing is the same as you're giving the date. And so this one was published in 2014. 2014, close parentheses. So remember, dates go in parentheses. What you're looking at next, if you come back to your directions, is you're giving the author, you're giving the date, you're then giving the title of the chapter. And so that title is going to be this Outside the Garden, the Natural World, and the Sound and the Fury. And so I'm going to copy and paste that and then revise it so it matches the citation style I want. Remember, revising that isn't just putting it in the same font and font size, it's also changing the capitalization. So we're changing garden is not a proper noun, neither is natural world. In the Sound and the Fury is, though, because that is a book title. It is a proper noun. We're going to leave that as capitalized. We're leaving outside and the because it's the first word of the title and the subtitle. Now, book chapter titles, you do not italicize. Just like you don't italicize article titles, you don't italicize book chapter titles. Next, what's going to come is the book info. And so this is one thing that's really unique for how you list this, that you are then going to tell us that this book chapter, so to help readers understand that this citation is for a book chapter, not just a book, not for a journal article, you're saying that it's in the name of the editors of the book and then the title of the work. So for that, we're going to say in, not in italics, but capitalize, the editor of this book. I got to get back to the right book. You don't see it on this page, but if you actually go back to this Primo record, remember it said this Taylor Haygood is the editor. And so we're going to list that as T. Haygood, H-A-G-O-O-D. Okay, parentheses, ED period, close parentheses. And so coming back to our instructions, so in editor name, period, comma after that. So we are using a comma, not a period, because we're getting all of the basic data for the book. So commas tend to mean that there's something coming after this. Remember that if you're writing, commas give you a pause, periods give you an end or a complete stop. So we're not using a period there because we're not stopping the book information. We're just pausing for the title of it. And that title is going to be Critical Insights, The Sound and the Fury. Copy that. Change the font, get rid of that hyperlink, and we do want to put it in italics. And we need to lowercase insights. Okay. Lowercase. There we go. We are keeping the Sound and the Fury because that is a proper noun. So it's the name of a specific book, which is a little bit confusing there, but it's a proper noun. And so we are keeping it period, or actually not period again. So this is where we are not quite done with the book information. So what comes after that, before you put that period, is you're going to give the page numbers of the chapter. And so you're coming back to this chapter info. You're seeing it's coming on this page 62 to 76. For APA, if it's multiple pages, it's more than one. You do, instead of PG, you do a double P, and I'm going to not in italics. The page numbers are not italicized. So a double P is just harkens back to that Latin background of academia, so it does mean multiple pages. And so it was 62 to 76, close parentheses, and then we're putting a period after that because that ends the book info. So info of of the editor and the title and the page numbers within it. Then finally, we close out with who is the publisher of this, so Gray House Publishing, Inc. Period at the end, and that's your complete citation. What's left to do? Hanging indent. So we press enter that one time, tab over, and then tab over that third and fourth line. So it's all going over 1 inch to the right. So there is how you do a book chapter when you have editors and an author. So the editor of the book is different than the author of the individual chapters. You see this much more commonly than you do just items that have an editor and authors, or no author and just an editor. A little bit of difference, but if you do see this, that's how you do that up there. One other thing you occasionally see is how you do a translation. Translation is kind of similar to how you would do a book that has an author and an editor. So you're giving the author of the book, so the person who originally wrote it, date, title of the book, and then you're following that with in parentheses translator info. So pretty similar to how you were doing the editor info following it. And then so to kind of give you an example of that, let's say you were reading this War and Peace. So you would see that Leo Tolstoy is the original author. So let's do a quick citation for this one. Tolstoy, Leo is the original author, period. We're looking for when this particular book is published, so 2016. You do not need this graph or 1828 to 1910. That is the date of Leo Tolstoy's life. So it's the author's lifespan, not part of the bibliographic information that you need. So we do need when this particular book was published, though, 2016. Period. Title, War and Peace. And we are only capitalizing the first word because that is there are no proper nouns within it. You're then following that. If we go back to here, you are not putting a period. I made a mistake, so no period. And taking it not in italics, but you're putting it with the translator's name. So, and once again, translators, if you're listing it in the parentheses after the title, it's going to come as first initial last name. And so coming back to that, you have this Louise Maud and Almer Maud. So looks like a couple. So we are going to list that one. So L Maud and A Maud, and then put trans after it. So we are establishing that is the translator, not an author. Finalize this citation, wrap it up with what is that publishing house. And so you're going to find that down here. First Avenue Editions. Typically, if you're seeing something that it's a division of a larger publishing group, you want to take the smaller name. You don't have to list two publishing houses, even if you have multiple ones listed. Typically, if you're looking for the publishing house, take what is listed first. That is the smaller group that's part of the whole. So if you can be more specific, it came out of this smaller piece, not the bigger learner publishing group. So do take that smaller one, copy, paste, and put it in your correct formatting. Go back, add that hanging indent, and we are good with that citation. Last thing I do want to show you, if I can get back to my page, of what do we do with books that have multiple editions. So this is the last thing that trips students up. If you are looking at an edition other than the first, so APA, if you have a book that is a first edition, you never list that. Most books that you're looking at are first editions, but academic books, you do start getting second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. editions. This is where they're making updates and changes to the book. So the edition coming out isn't that it's just being printed again, is that they've made changes and revisions to it. So if they have done that and you're seeing an edition listed on the work, you do have to include it, only if it's something other than the first. And it's really simple to do that. You just add the number of the edition in parentheses after the title. So looking at this one, we're getting these authors here. So GPS Satellite Surveying, 4th edition. How do we do this? We do author first. And so remember, we do things last name, first initial, comma, not a semicolon, ampersand before the last one in the list, period at the end, parentheses, what was the date for this one? So the date is 2015. You're seeing that under the title there, period after that. Copy that, GPS Satellite Surveying, put it in italics. And then the edition number, how you're going to list that is you're just listing it after number of the edition. Does not go in italics, but it does go in parentheses. So this one was the 4th edition. So 4th ed, period, after the parentheses closed there. So that is, you're just adding that it's a 4th edition in parentheses after the title. Don't put the period until after the edition number because that is part of the what is this section of the citation. And then finally, Where was this published? We got to look down at the details. Publisher is Wiley. And finally, once again, tab over, enter in tab to get that hanging indent. So this is kind of your basics for how do you create book citations. Who, what, when, where. It's where you start getting variations of that editor versus author. Translators is a possibility. Additions is a more common one. Book chapters is far more common one that you will be seeing. Last thing you would do, so if you were using this as a bibliography, remember how we talked about what a bibliography is? It's a list of sources on a subject. Lots of times it's used as a works cited or a reference page. If you were turning this in with your research paper, you would not want to turn it in like this. You got one last thing you want to do, and that is alphabetize it. So remember I told you can alphabetize as you go so that you can pull your books or your citations that you're putting in order as you're typing them up. I tend to do it at the end. So if we are looking at that, what I do is then highlight, left click, drag and drop so that I am putting this in alphabetical order by that last name that is listed. So Leek comes after J. Sorry, I had to sing the alphabet if you need to. When you are alphabetizing bibliographies, you alphabetize the entire citation alphabetically. You do not alphabetize ever within the list of how you're ordering the authors within the citation. These are listed in the order they are listed on the book or in the item record you're looking at. So I would not rearrange this to have Crane be first. That would be completely incorrect. Typically, the order authors are listed on a book, on the cover or on the title page or in that item record, if you're looking at a library resource, is a pecking order of who was most important in this list of authors. Who was the team lead? Who is the most prestigious person? So this is why we are not alphabetizing the names within the citation. You only alphabetize the citations as a whole by the author's name. So keep that in mind. For the assignment that you're going to do today, I do want you to alphabetize bibliography like you were turning it in as a reference list or works cited.